Well, hello everyone. Welcome, welcome. Super exciting day today. Obviously, pretty excited. So first of all, just thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to join us here at the Brown Book Club. If you don't know me, my name is Robert Ramirez. We've had this book club going for, we just hit our 5 year in July. So 5 years of doing this club. It's been great. A lot of familiar faces that have helped make it all happen. So super excited about that. So let's jump in. Today we have with us Miss Jenny Torres Sanchez. Hey Jenny, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, doing great.
Thank you
So
so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with this group, and I'm really honored to be asked. So thank you.
awesome. It's been our pleasure. This book is, I think it's one that even though you wrote it a few years ago, it continues to be relevant, continues to be necessary. So hopefully we can get to have some good questions and conversations because yeah, it's a great book and it's unfortunately needed, right? It's still needed.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm gonna just from your website, I'm gonna just read your short bio, even though I really like the extended bio. I'm gonna just read your short bio, and then we'll jump into a little icebreaker question.
Great.
All right. So Jenny Torres Sanchez is a full-time writer and former English teacher. She has lived on the border of two worlds her whole life. She's the author of several young adult novels, many of which have landed on best of lists and won various honors. Her latest, We Are Not From Here, is a Pura Belpre honor book and has been described as the New York Times by the New York Times as a novel precisely for this moment, and still so. So Jenny has also contributed to several short story and essay anthologies, and her debut picture book, With Lots of Love, was Jumpstart's Read for the Record selection of 2023. So awesome. Thank you and welcome again. We're excited to get started.
Thank you.
All right, just a question that has nothing to do with the book or anything to start us off. If you could have dinner, lunch, drinks with anybody from history, alive or dead, obviously, who would you pick and why?
So I've actually been asked this like a long time ago, and I wrote this whole like, I don't know, semi-short story on it. But I would love to hang out for a while with Frida Kahlo because I just think that she is an amazing woman. I mean, aside from her artwork, which I adore and I find a lot of inspiration in, actually, there's one painting in particular that I found a lot of inspiration for We Are Not From Here. Aside from that, I just think that she'd be an amazing person to talk to and get her perspective. And I just saw her as a very revolutionary figure. And being Latina too, just somebody that I would definitely want to have drinks with and hang out with for a while.
But yeah, I've read that you love music and you also paint, so that seems to coincide.
Yeah. I paint very badly, but I do like playing around with it. So
Nice. It's like therapy, right? It's just like it feels good.
yeah, and something that I don't feel like, even though I'm a little bit competitive and I do like to do things well, it's somewhere where I really allow myself to make mistakes because it's like, this is not my vocation, but it's something that I like to do for fun. So it's a nice break from the writing.
Puro East LA, born and raised. I work with the community and I really appreciate your book. It's kind of been broader more about the Central American experience versus Mexicanos who I normally interact with every day. So it was really eye-opening. Thank you for the writing. My question had to do with intentional symbolism of names in the book. The kids, especially for the kids, Pulga, Chico, Pequeña, all small names, you know, and they like go through a lot of self-worth issues throughout the book. And I think they're like feeling small. And it was not until like Flor actually bloomed that she got the idea that her life was changing. I wanted to know if that was intentional symbolism.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for noticing that. And absolutely. The first name that came to me was Bulga's name. Because the way that I write, it's usually the characters that come to me first. I find inspiration in headlines and what I see happening around me, but the story itself doesn't develop for me until a character shows up. And Pulga showed up, and I saw him on top of this train because I'd read about and I knew about La Bestia. And I saw him on top of that train, and I was like, here's the story. It starts with this boy right here, Pulga. And I saw him on top of that train, and what I heard him say was, I'm just a flea on this beast of a train. And so I was like, oh, okay, he feels like a flea. This is his name, this is his nickname, because nicknames is something that I grew up with, like everybody's always giving in the Latino community, it's very, very common, those nicknames. My nickname was Oso growing up, so I just heard his nickname and I was like, okay, he feels small. He is small, but he also feels small. And in the eyes of the world, not his family, because his family loves him, but outsiders, people not in his family, they do view him as somebody small. They do view him as a flea. They do view him as a pest. And I knew that this was something he felt, and it was something he wanted to change. So as soon as I knew Pulga felt that way and that was his nickname, then with Chico and Pequeña, I did intentionally pick their names, to also reflect that feeling of feeling small and dismissed and overlooked in the world. Um, you know, and having Flor reclaim her name and seeing herself as something that's blooming and something that's beautiful was very intentional. So I think that that's how a lot of children in their situation feel. They don't feel seen by the world. They do feel like these little, things that don't even need to be considered. And that really angered me, and that's why I wrote this book. So yeah, it was symbolic on a lot of levels, because I also think nicknames can be endearing, and I definitely wanted them to have nicknames as well. Hi, Ray.
Hey Jenny, how are you?
I like your name, Ray. There's no offense here in the book.
Right? Y sigo siendo el rey. Hey, so when I grow up, I want to be like you. I'm in an MFA program, so I'm writing a novel for middle grade and maybe YA.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about so many things. One is just your writer's journey,
Mm.
and how you got into the publishing world. And then the other is just how did you find the voice for the children? Like how do you, I mean, how do you write for, from a children's perspective, and make sure it's authentic and something that captures the moment. I'm a lawyer, and I've represented children that have come on La Bestia and have come to the States, and um they're very complicated, wonderful, kind of like extremely powerful teachers.
Mm.
And I'm always worried that we don't really capture their beauty and their power, and we're focusing so much on the trauma,
Yeah.
like the I think a lot of youth are kind of tired of just being seen as labor, or kind of these kind of like from a diminished standpoint. So I'm just curious about like your process for finding their voice and expressing it.
Yeah. So I'll take the second question first. The finding their voice, that's always difficult for writers, I think, is really because you hear yourself too as you're writing, you hear your own voice. There's in every book that I've ever written, in every character that I've ever written, there's some of me. And so you don't want that to be their voice, you don't want them to be puppets. You want them to be these dynamic, real people, because they are, to me, they are. Those characters are as precious to me as my children are. So what I try to do is to take a step back. Me, myself, the author, Jenny, all my experiences, I try to put that in, on the back burner. And when they show up and I start asking them, like, hey, why are you here? What's happened to you? What have you gone through? What do you like? And I get to start to get to know them. I try, as strange as this may sound, like to really listen, to listen and to not let it be me that's answering those questions, but that character. And what that character would say from their predicament. And that's not always easy. And I have to kind of start from scratch and look at the world through their eyes. And so a lot of times when I'm writing and I'm having trouble getting into the character or really understanding or getting to know this character, I really try to look at the world through their eyes. And I'll go to like an art museum and I'll look at things and I'll try to look at it not as me, Jenny, but as Pequeña. If Pequeña looked at that painting, what would she see? And what emotions would it trigger in her? And what memories would it trigger in her? And how would it resonate with her? And that's where I get a lot of the backstory from my characters. And I get a lot of the experiences that they've had. And those things may never make it into the book, because I'm not going to tell the history of everything that they've been through. But it helps to inform me as the writer as to who they are. And when I know who they are, I know what their motivations are. And so then I can write them more authentically. Like Pequeña would do this because I, the writer, know that when she was 5, this happened, or when she was 8, this happened. And so then I know them. Then they do become full fleshed people to me. And that's when their voice really comes out. But writing is a craft, so it's not, no matter how much you try, it can still be difficult. Like I did have trouble sometimes making the voices of these 3 characters sound different because they were going through the exact same experience. So that's something that I struggled a bit as I wrote this book. Um, but yeah, I agree with you very much about characters like Pulga Pequeña and Chico not being just their trauma. And I am so like, I want those other stories also to be out in the world. I think it's very important to not limit children like Pulga and Chico and Pequeña as just their trauma or allow that to be their only identity. This book was about that journey, right? And this book is about that part. I tried to put as much as I could also of them not being just trauma. I tried to show the love between their family, their love and of community and within their community when they lived in Guatemala, and it not being just a place of violence, but this beautiful place that is really hard to let go of and leave. But yeah, I want to, and I do see, and I welcome books that really focus on other things other than trauma. Um, that being said, for me, it was very important to bear witness to what I was seeing with unaccompanied children. So that's a bit about their voices. My writing journey was interesting, I guess. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in 4th grade. There was this creative writing assignment that the teacher gave us, and I loved writing it. I loved like escaping into this make-believe world that I was creating. And I knew then that that's something I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it. My teacher, she read to us a lot that year. Miss Macaluso, my 4th grade teacher, she read to us every single day, like the last 15 or 20 minutes of class. And I remember her to this day because of that gift that she gave us. And she read all kinds of books. The ones that I remember most are the Ramona Quimby books and the Judy Blume books, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. This is what I want to do with my life. But I never really said it out loud. Like if somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would say I want to be a lawyer, because that seemed like a safe answer. And I didn't, this was before there was like author visits and all of that stuff. And I didn't really see people like me becoming authors, and I didn't really see names like Torres, on the books that we were reading. And so it was almost like a dream that I was afraid to dream for myself. But it was something that I carried ever since I was young. And then as I got older, I just had more interest in it. You know, I remember my 10th grade teacher, she really like awoke for me like literature and poetry. And I remember saying to her, you know, like, "Oh, I love literature. I don't know what I can do with this. Do you think that someday I could be a professor?" You know, I said that to her, and she looked at me and she's like, "Of course you can." And it was with this certainty that she said it. And I was just like, I can. Wait, hold on. I can do that, you know? And it was just the first time that I felt like that could be a dream for me, you know, like the world of literature could be something for me. And so then I thought maybe I'd be a professor, but I knew I should study English literature. And that's what I did. I studied literature because it's what I loved. And I just figured, you know, I'll teach literature. And then I became a high school English teacher. And then I just, you know, was like, I still want to write this book. I still want to write this book. I was married. I already had two children, and I was applying to the MFA program at UCF, which is where I got my bachelor's degree. And it's close by to my house. And I got denied from the MFA program. Not once, not twice, not three times. I think it was up to five times that I applied. And I remember sitting at the coffee shop with my husband when I got the last rejection letter. And I said, I want to learn how to write, but these people won't teach me and they won't let me into this program, you know? And he's like, well, do it anyway. Do it anyway. You don't need, you know, you don't need to go and get your master's degree and take that route. He's like, find another route. And I said, you know what? You're right. You're right. And so then I just said, I'm going to do this. I don't care. And I started reading more craft books, you know, and I started figuring out, okay, if you're serious about writing a book, how do you go about that? And just kind of like learning more about it. And then I started writing a book and I started learning about publishing, about agents, the publishing world. You know, like if you want to be traditionally published, you should get a literary agent. Um, you know, there's self-publishing, there's two routes you can take. And the one that interested me more was traditional publishing. So I learned everything I could about that and I started querying. And I got a literary agent after I had finished writing my first book. And then, you know, just haven't stopped writing since, basically. But I can answer more specific questions about you know, about agents and all that, if you'd like. But that's just the general overhaul of it all.
No, that's wonderful. I'm in Pasadena, so I'm at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe.
Okay,
So I kind of just got into that, and
that's
so that
fantastic.
yeah, it's really exciting. But
Yeah,
that's such a thank you so much.
yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Ray. Ray always has such good insight, and yeah, he's a gem around here. Cool. So I'm gonna ask one of my questions because you said so many things, and I was like, oh, I want to piggyback on that. But just to throw out, there's a lot of educators in this group. So the fact that you were an educator, I'm sure they love that. A lot of writers in this group.
That's
So
very cool.
um, as far as the educating, I've read several places that you were a teacher. So my question, one of them is, what do you miss most about teaching? And I want to talk about the book too, right? But what do you
Yeah.
miss most about teaching, and especially that age group?
Oh, man, I miss my students. I miss my students. I mean, I loved hanging out and talking with and getting their perspective of the world, right? I taught 11th graders mostly, and it was American literature. And, you know, 11th graders for me are like the most perfectly jaded, you know, group of high schoolers because they are over, you know, the excitement of starting high school. They already have their eye on the prize with senior year, but they're not there yet. It's still far away. So they're just kind of stuck, you know? And I love, they'd be like, Miss, do we really have to read this? You know, or Miss, do we this, do we that? And I was like, listen, it's not just about reading, it's not just about the books, you know, like this is about life. We're talking about life in this classroom and, you know, like human like everything that humans have gone through and everything that they've felt and everything that they've seen and there's so much here and I had just really cool students. And after a while, they'd come out of their shells and they'd start talking, and we'd had some of the most amazing conversations. And so I really just miss talking to that age group, because they're also they're also fearless. A lot of people feel like, especially now, like we have to protect young people and be careful about what they read and, and it starts with these honest conversations. And young people can handle anything. They really can. They can handle talking about anything. And what's the safest way to introduce that than through books, right? And to open that dialogue. And we always tell our young people, come to us. And then we say, but don't talk to us about this, or this. That doesn't make sense. So I miss those conversations. I miss that fearlessness. I miss them being jaded, but also having like a lot of hope and feeling like they still can go and make a change in the world. And so I miss that. They inspired me to write young adult because those conversations, the reason that I stopped teaching was my son had a lot of like speech and language and developmental and social delays when he was born. And so I had to spend a lot of time taking him to different therapies and all of that. So I stayed home so that I could focus on him. And so, when he was in his therapies, these different therapies, I had nothing to do except worry about him. And I was like, this is what I'm going to write. So I started writing my first book that way. While he was in his therapy sessions, I was, typing away on the computer. And I missed having the conversations in the classroom, so I brought those conversations into the books. And so that's kind of how that happened.
Awesome. Awesome. That's good. It's really cool about this is getting into your head, getting into the author's head. It's like, oh, that's why she did that, or that's what was going on during that time. So
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm here in San Diego. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
I listened to your audio. I listened on audio and I heard the little epilogue at the end. I think that's what they call it. And so you kind of touched on it already, but did you base any of your characters on real people? Like maybe people that you came across when doing your research and
Yeah. The characters aren't based on anyone specifically. They're more just based on just generally, what I knew about the population of unaccompanied children. And of course, like there's a lot of just my own personal relationships with different people that can, you can find little strands of. I know that I'm very biased, but my son is one of the most gentle souls that I've ever met. He's very kind, he's very gentle, he's very conscientious. And when I was writing Chico, I mean, I know it's tragic what happens to Chico, but that purity, all that goodness that he has in him, is things that I've witnessed in my son. And, when I talk about like the little girl whose grandfather, passed away in front of her when she starts screaming, like there was a situation with my grandfather when I was younger where he, had this kind of episode and I started screaming. And so little things like that make their way. But each character is very much their own character that might have some traces here and there of my life experiences or people that I've come across, but they're very much their own characters.
yeah, thank you so much. And it was like such a powerful book and just like obviously it's like hard to read at some parts, but yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you for it's
Yeah,
and like it's so important, especially now. So thank you.
thank you. That's what's been one of the hardest things too, is that, I actually started writing this book way before it was published, like years before it was published. And it's so heartbreaking to me, right? That like something that I started working on even more than 10 years ago, and that was published 5 years ago, still continues to be so relevant, and we're just seeing things get worse, and that's been hard to see. Yeah.
And on the flip side, it's nice to have these resources like your book and others that, you know, spread some humanity around, and not just the BS or the hate that we see on the news and whatnot. So it's needed for sure.
Thank you.
So our next question, she has a little cough, so I'm sorry, but I'm gonna call you anyway, Miss Amelia.
Yeah, I was trying to, be on the down low here, Robert, but I always have questions. Yes, Jenny, thank you for being here. Kind of going back on what you were talking about with young people, I think you're a really good person to answer this because you did teach teenagers too. And it's just kind of a general question just on your thoughts and stuff. For book bans, like you mentioned it, there's a lot of talk about book bans and what's appropriate and inappropriate. So just kind of like your thoughts on all that. Suggestions maybe if you have like on how to fight against that. How to encourage, banned books to be read, and anything like any information or thoughts you have on that. And then a second question that I'm gonna go ahead and ask you because my cough will probably come back in a little bit. Is just like the research you did. I don't know, like, did your family have personal experience with it? Do you know people? Like, just research. So those are my two questions.
Sure. Thank you, Amelia. I really appreciate those questions. With book bans, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to me because everything about book bans is just people that are in power and small-minded adults that don't want to, allow kids to be informed. I have never met any child who was afraid of what they were going to find in a book. I've never met any child who has, you know, changed their views on gender or any of that because of a book. And I just feel that it's ridiculous that adults are doing this, that they don't want to have honest conversation with kids are not afraid of what they're going to come across in books, and they're not afraid to have honest conversations. It's adults who feel uncomfortable and are afraid, and so they don't even want to open that up. And I just find that incredibly frustrating. And I sympathize with teachers who um, want to do the right thing and want to bring these books into the classroom and want to have these discussions on one hand, and on the other hand, have to fear for their job security if they do. So it's just this really difficult situation that I don't think that there's any easy answers to at all. I think that the only thing that you can do as an educator is, see who will support you as far as administration is concerned. And for some teachers, they can still make those books available in the classrooms. They can still find ways to maybe recommend those books to children. But I do sympathize with what a difficult position teachers are put in. I know that there are a lot of people who go to the school meetings to, have their voices heard about books not being banned. So I think that's very powerful as well. Because I think up to this point, so many people who just want books banned are allowed to say, oh, let's take these books out of our classrooms, and I think we need that other voice there just as strong, and just as many people showing up to say, you can't dictate what every child reads.
To add to that question, can you like just kind of, and I feel like we all probably know this a little bit, but it's just really helpful when we hear, authors kind of put it into thoughts. It's something we like to do with the Brown Book Club. The importance of stories like this one, how, you're talking about how kids can handle it. Because honestly, like when I was listening to this, I would, usually like I'm a tia and a godmother and stuff, a madrina and stuff. So I'm always thinking like, okay, what books can I force on my kiddos? And so this was one that I was like, I don't think I can give them this book. And not because it's not important, but just because it's so, traumatic. And then some of them already have things going on, similar issues and stuff. And and then I caught myself and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I just thought that, you know, because I've always thought like what you think too. And so, yeah, just like the importance of these stories and getting them into the hands of like teenagers and young adults.
Yeah, well, and you know, I want to validate what you're saying, Amelia, when you say, "Well, I don't think I can handle, I can give this to this child at this moment." I think that's perfectly valid at also, you know, because sometimes a child may be re-traumatized from reading a book because it speaks so closely to what they're experiencing at that moment. So maybe that's not the right time for them to have that book, but that's not to say that they should never have that book or they shouldn't have the choice to have that book when maybe they're a little bit in a place where they're more ready for it, right? So sometimes, and I really appreciate people who do know their kiddos so well that, you know, they can be like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the right time for this particular book because, or, you know, for some kids, they want to read something of exactly what they're going through in that moment because it helps to voice what they're feeling, you know, and it helps to validate them. So I think it can go either way, but I don't think that people who don't know our kids at all should be the ones who dictate and say, this is what everybody can read and this is what nobody should read, you know? So there's a big difference there. But yeah, so speaking to that, I'm sorry, I forgot a couple parts of your question.
That's okay. There's just so much to talk about. Yeah, the importance of getting these stories into, because yeah, like while you're saying it's not for everybody, like there, you know, just because it's not for one kid doesn't mean that the rest of them shouldn't have it. Yeah, so just kind of the importance of getting these type of stories of marginalized people, you know, that you don't hear, and then specifically of undocumented or asylum seekers into the hands of teenagers and young adults.
Some of the most powerful responses that I've had to this book have been from teenagers who have gone through similar experiences. And they've told me, you know, like, and I've had teachers tell me that they've come to them crying, you know, and saying, I can't believe my story is in a book. I can't believe my story is in a book because they have felt like Pulga, Pequeña, and Chico. They have felt small in the world and invalidated and like they weren't important enough to write about. And one of the reasons that I wrote this book was to validate those children and to say, I see you. You are important. You are beautiful. Your story is worth telling. And it's important that we bear witness to it, you know, because I think all of us can agree that history rewrites itself, you know, to the people who are in power who benefit from rewriting that story and who benefit from saying, oh, this didn't happen and this doesn't exist and this, you know, this didn't go down the way it went down. And I wanted to make sure that I wrote like this happened. This is happening to our community, to our children, and just validating that. So I think stories like this are important for that reason, to validate the story of children going through it. First and foremost, for me, it's to validate the story of children going through it, and then also to foster the empathy and understanding from people who are not going through it. But for me, it was always about the kids going through it and, you know, just being able to put that down on paper and have it recorded so that nobody could say later on that it didn't happen.
Thank you. That's so powerful. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Amelia. Great questions. She went from I don't feel good, I can't ask questions to come on, we knew you had something to say. So I want to dive into a question that is more specific to the book. And so there's a bruja type character, you know, and there's like some supernatural magical elements. I don't know if it cut off. So I'm just wondering what inspired you to have like a bruja in the character, or you know, it's common for us because we read all Latina, indigenous books. So to us, this is very common. It's very real. It's our stories told from our abuelitas too. But yeah, what inspired you to put that into the book?
So La Bruja was inspired by a dream that I had. And I had this dream when I was 6 years old. And so La Bruja has kind of, I guess you could say, haunted me ever since I was a little kid. I just remember this dream very vividly when I was little of this, exactly as she's described, this woman kind of descending from, up in the sky down into the living room. And she had the long gray hair, the dazzly eyes, the kind of very fearful. I remember being really scared in my dream. Um, and I always thought about that dream, just stayed with me, and I always thought about her, and I always wondered about her. And I just remember talking to one of my writer friends one time and telling them, yeah, I always think about this bruja from this dream that I had when I was 6. And she's like, oh, she's like your muse. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, she's like your muse. And then it's all of a sudden I started thinking of her in this positive light, this thing that I had been scared of ever since I was a little kid, but I would think about often. All of a sudden I was thinking of her as being like this thing that helped inspire me to create stories and to create things. And this duality that she had was very interesting to me, as somebody who could be scary and fearful, or you could fear, and also somebody that was doing something good, or like this thing of goodness. And so that very much came into this story where La Bruja for Pequeña is something kind of scary and terrifying, but also that saves her many times. So that's actually where La Bruja came from. But I love doing the surrealism and magical writing in my stories, magical realism in my stories, both of those things, because I just think it's really interesting, and it feels very natural to me, growing up with the kind of stories that we grow up hearing and all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like that's I've seen a few of your interviews, and I feel like that doesn't come up often enough. But for us, we catch those things right away, right? Oh,
Yeah.
did you the part with the bruja, and then she came back, and it's kind of like Bless Me Ultima, how she's both the kind of scary, and then she's helping us throughout the book, and yeah, no, I love that you wrote that into there.
Thank you.
I think Laura had a question in the comments.
Uh,
I can't see the
Yeah, I
comments.
was just wondering what Frida Kahlo painting helped inspire the book you mentioned at the beginning.
yeah, it's what oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot the name. It's like What We See in the Water, or What the Water Gave Us, something like that. And the painting is, she has her 2 feet up on the bathtub, and there's a bunch of little things in the water, and it's like her grandparents, and like all these different personal things to Frida's life. And when I was writing the birthing scene with Pequeña, and there's all this stuff floating on the surface of the water. That was very much inspired by the painting.
Oh, I pulled it up real quick. It's What the Water Gave Me.
What the Water Gave Me. Yeah.
There's so much in there. I would have to sit there for 10 minutes and pick out all the details.
Yeah, I just, when I saw Pequeña having the baby, and I'm familiar with Frida's work, that's the first thing that kind of like popped into my head. And then I spent a lot of time, kind of referring back to that painting as I wrote this book. And yeah, all the little trinkets that Pequeña sees, and then were very much just go hand in hand with that painting.
Love it. If anybody has a question, feel free to do the little raise your hand thing. I have another one, and it's kind of a big picture thing, but how do you hope the novel challenges the current narrative about migration in the US? And do you feel like over the past few years your book has already had an impact?
Thankfully, I do feel like it's had an impact. I know that this is a book that a lot of teachers have brought into their classroom, in high school and in college, so I know that it's been in a lot of Latino literature courses and Latina literature courses. And um, yeah, I love that it's being discussed. I love that there's a place where it's being discussed, and that teachers are introducing it to their students and to young people. Um, as far as challenging the current conversation out there, I think we fear what we don't know. And so I think a lot of people I think that there's just a lot of racism and hate out there, right? But I think also so many people just they don't know and they don't want to know. And that's frustrating when they don't want to know. But um, my challenge, or the way that I challenge that, is just by putting the truth out there anyway. You don't want to know? I don't care, but I'm going to write it down and I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to put it out there in the world. So the only way to challenge that kind of, I guess, you know, that way of thinking is to just put the truth out there anyway. And so that's what I tried to do with this book. It is a book of fiction, but I tried to write it as authentically as I possibly could, by doing a lot of research, because I felt a huge responsibility to get this story right. At times that responsibility was crippling. This book was hard to write because I wanted to do right by these characters and my community and my people by it. So I wanted to make sure I got it right, and I did a lot of research in order to do that. And I did a lot of research to tell the truth in a work of fiction.
I want to keep this vague, but it's a conversation that probably everyone's had. Yeah, I thought I was on mute.
No, you're
Does it bother you that other people try to tell these stories that maybe shouldn't necessarily be the ones telling these stories? Like, how did you feel about that? Is it we could keep it vague, right?
Yeah.
How did that bother you? How did that not bother you? I mean, is it an issue?
It's not an issue as far as like it dictating what I do. I go out and I tell what I tell. And I don't want to dictate whom should write what, right? Like I don't want to do that. However, I think that if you're writing about a community, then you really have to know that community. If you're right, and particularly if you're writing the trauma of that community, then you have to come from a place of love and knowing. And I feel like when I wrote the hard parts of this book, um, that I had to write, because if I don't write the hard parts, then I'm acting as if they don't exist. And that's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to write a G-rated, rosy, story about the violence that young children face, or the fear that they face, or what they're going through. So I knew I had to write the truth about those things. But the last thing I ever wanted was for anybody to think that I'm writing it just to entertain the reader, because I'm not. I'm writing it because it's important that you look at this that's hard to look at. But because I come from a family of immigrants, because I have had cousins detained in detention centers, because I've seen people, treat my parents like dirt because of their accent or their inability to communicate or the color of their skin, um, it is very personal to me. And along with the trauma and the truth about like the violence of a lot of people in our community face, I want to make sure I also brought out the love, that was very important to me. It was important to me to show the love between Pulga and his mother. It was important for me to show the love between Pequeña and her mother, and the love that these two women had for each other, like they were sisters. It was important for me to show how they found family in each other and how much they loved their community and how they all came together for, funerals and for all of those kinds of things. So I wanted to make sure that I told this story with love. And I think that you can do that best if you are very familiar with your community and with your people. And if you're not, then you do really risk telling a glamorized, version of it and not the authentic version of it.
Wow, that was great. I like that you pointed out, and I'm always gonna remember that now that it's not about the entertainment value. It's like the need to tell the story to the community or of the community. That's yeah.
I
Thank you.
think something that can happen sometimes is people are like trying to entertain and they include violence because they think it'll keep people changing or, turning the page. And if that's the reason that you're doing it, then don't do it, like do it because out of love. Do it out of love.
Awesome. Completely agree. So before I ask you about, I saw you had some notes there on the wall to what you're working on next. Does anybody have any questions? I think I saw Ray again. Mr. Ray, feel free.
Yeah, just real quickly, I interviewed Hector Tovar. Yeah, he's Guatemalan, and
Mm,
he's written the book Our Migrant Souls, and he had always felt like he was an accident, just because of the stories that his parents had told him about they had met because of a car accident, and
mhm,
he had kind of like internalized that to mean that he was an accident. And then later in life, and he was always ashamed of being an immigrant, and like, or at least when he was growing up, he was ashamed. And as he became older and actually he went to Guatemala, he kind of was able to realize that migration is just part of being human. Like we
mhm.
all have kind of an immigration story somewhere in our past. Uh, and so I'm just curious how your immigration story has impacted your writing, and how you feel like you must tell these stories, especially in light of the ICE raids and this moment that's so heavy, and that we're fighting against white supremacy, and it's coming from the federal government.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think my story has come from bearing witness to what my parents have gone through. As I said earlier, I've obviously, if you're not white in the United States, you're going to face racism and prejudice. So I've obviously faced that growing up, and the cruelty of that, but also witnessed my parents going through that, and that's really terrible as a child to see your parents being treated, these people you look up to and you think can do anything in the world, and then for other people to like humillarlos, to like put them less than and humiliate them and all of that was always really hard for me. And it just, I don't know. I guess it just angered me. Like even as a child, it was this anger that I carried with me and I had to do something with, and how do I turn this into something? And how do I turn this into something else other than just anger that's going to, stay with me and be bitter and ferment. So that's these stories and writing books like this one in my picture book with lots of love, is how I turned that into something of value for me. And yeah, it was just my parents and the stories that they told me and the things that they'd been through, and um, different stories in our families that I heard, that really inspired me to write stories like We Are Not From Here.
Yeah, I had some concerns with things that were kind of untied in the story. A little bit about unnamed baby always being unnamed,
Yeah.
but but he was loved, and I think Pequeña's mom probably fought for him more than evil King Gray would ever do.
Mhm.
So I have hope for him. Mine
Mhm.
is I still have nightmares about Nene.
I know.
He was doted on. His parents loved him. He spoke. He was bright and happy kid. And when they stuck him in the cage, he found Pulga, and Pulga got taken away. And
Mhm.
I'm still having nightmares about what happened to Nene. I
I'm
want to know. Maybe
sorry.
you'd be interested in making a short story and
I know.
cleaning that up, or what do you think happened to him?
Jocelyn, I'm sorry that you're having nightmares about Nene. I think Nene haunts me as well. Because so when I write, and especially when I write stories like this, I tend to not be the type of author who ties things up in a nice, neat little ribbon at the end. Because particularly stories like We Are Not From Here, it's not a neat ending. There there's so much uncertainty for children like Pulga Pequeña and Chico. And I like the reason the story ends the way it does with them is because, like with Pulga and Pequeña, I want that uncertainty to follow the reader once they've closed the book. So it really parallels, or it really, mirrors what children in real life who are like them face, which is an uncertain future. And with Nene, it would be really dishonest of me to write a story with everybody being okay always.
Mhm.
And I think Nene really is just an embodiment and very symbolic of the reality that not all these kids are okay. That many of our children are sacrificed because of the world that they've been born into and the situations they've been born into, and the powers that be that continue to ignore them. And I felt like I had to be honest about that to readers. Um, you know, and that's what Nene represents really is and is symbolic of is all the children who are not okay, who have been left somewhere by themselves, whose futures we don't know and they don't know. But yeah, it haunts me, and that's difficult to be haunted by that, and it's also necessary to put it out there in the world that that's the truth of the matter.
Thank you.
I think your choice of Ray is kind of haunting too. That's kind of
What's
causing nightmares.
The choice of
that?
name.
Oh, okay.
He's such a positive guy in this group, but in that book, not so much.
I know, and I named him Ray because king, and he wanted to be the king of everything, and held a certain power over people, you know.
We have a group chat of moderators, and we talk about the book and stuff. And I just wanted to, one of our moderators, she has said every time that Pequeña is narrating that it just makes her very emotional, and that she thinks about her family and her friends. And I'm being anonymous here, but your book definitely impacted a lot of us. So
Oh,
thank you for that.
thank you.
Can I ask what you're working on next? We see you're doing some work there on the wall. What's going
I
on?
Well, on the wall, I have sometimes just like like quotes and things from different writers and about writing on the world and all that. So that's some of the sticky notes up there. And yeah, I've worked on a graphic novel that is in the works of getting published. So that's still kind of, just kind of waiting to sign the contracts, but that's done, which is really exciting working on a graphic novel. Because I like to draw, but I'm not doing the illustrations for this. I just wrote the storyline, and the bubbles. I just did the text. But it's a really interesting, different form of writing, which is really cool. I love doing it. So that would be a graphic novel for middle grade students. And then I'm working on hopefully like my first adult novel that has a lot of different moving parts. But you know, it does have to do because my mom's from Guatemala and my dad's from El Salvador. And so it does have to do with some Salvadoran history. My husband is from Mexico, so my family, like our household is all kinds of, you know, we got everything going on here. But so I'm working on that adult novel that has some of that. It has a relationship with sisters and hopefully something that kind of incorporates the present and the past and the rippling effects of a lot of different things. So that's something that I'm working on, but that one's going to take me, I think, like I know it's one of these books that's going to take like 5 or 6 years to get everything the way I want it. So that's my long-term project.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, I wanted to say, I always forget kind of, but Puerto Barrios, that's where like that's where my aunt lives. So Pulga's house is actually my tia Dora's house that I go to and visit. And the store like that he can see from the patio, like that's the store I would go to when I would be on the patio just laying on the hammock. I'd go to, it used to belong to a woman named Doña Margarita. And you know, so I just kind of like changed the name and put it into the story. But yeah, Pulga's room is like the room that I would stay in when I would go to Guatemala. And so his neighborhood is very much like very familiar to me because that's where I'd hang out.
nice. Love it. Actually, it made me think of Juarez. I used to go to Juarez a lot growing up and my grandma's. And so thinking about the store in the corner is it was
Yeah,
very vivid.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Does anybody else have anything before we call it a day? This has been great, by the way. It's love
Thank
picking your brain.
Real quick, I still have the cough. I have a question too. Um, I was just wondering why, and I guess just because like as Mexicans, like we have huge families, you know, and families like everything. I was just curious as to why they weren't blood related. Like I was just curious, like why that choice.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know that I did that like with like this intentional thing, but my mom comes from a smaller family. It's just three of them, siblings, you know. And so my mom's and my dad's family, there's 10 of them on his side of the family. So my mom's side of the family always kind of felt smaller to me, and I think that just kind of naturally found its way into the book, and I ended up making their families smaller and, you know, to me also the idea of found family is very important, so I wanted to incorporate that family. And you know, there's so many people that I've called in my life tia, that are my real tias, you know, because that's how it is in my family. So I wanted to put some of that in there. But yeah, you know, it's funny when you said Mexican families are so large, because I used to think my family was big with my dad's 10 brothers and sisters. And so when I met my husband, who's from Chihuahua, and I told him, "Oh yeah, I have a big family," he laughed at me because he comes from like on his mom's side, there's 10 of them, and on his dad's side, there's 11. And he's like, I have cousins I don't even meet sometimes until like 10 or 20 years later. So I was like, okay, you beat me. You won. Thank you all. I love that this was mostly a group of like, you know, educators and Latinos, and because that's very important to me. It feels like family when I go into a book club like this. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, you take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend, and
Yeah.
we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Adios.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.